if as you age, you plan in advance, you could really protect all of your assets. Now you might ask, protect assets from what? Like I just mentioned, long-term care as you age. And then for anyone, you want to make sure there are no estate tax issues. You want to make sure that your assets go just the way you want them. Should the home or other assets be in a trust? Should that trust be irrevocable? Should it be revocable? What makes sense in what situations? And every situation, every client is different. So that's where I'm going to start. But I want to start off with what documents should everyone have? So everyone knows. Everyone should have what? A will, right? Last will and testament, where you go when where your assets are going to go when you pass away. Now you heard about the TOD deeds, right? The transfer upon death deeds. They're okay. It would avoid probate with the house, but with a TOD deed, you're just not planning. The house is there, it'll go, but you haven't planned it all. If you need long-term care, or there's an estate tax issue, etc., that TOD deed won't help you. So it's good just to avoid probate, the transfer upon death deeds. I think they're about a year old now.
I was gonna say that's a new.
It's in New York. In New York, it's almost brand new, maybe not even a year. But a lot of people think it's a panacea, but it's really not. It's just like having a bank account, you know, Ron, ITF Jackie, and trust for, or payable upon death to Jackie or my sons. Yeah, Jack, well, I have sons, Jackie, sorry. Bad example. But anyway, that's what the TOD, transfer upon death deed, is, but it doesn't really help you plan. It just avoids probate on the house. It's not bad, but it just avoids probate on the house. And I think in other states, they've had TOD deeds for a long time, but not in New York. This is something new. So a will basically sets forth where your assets go when you pass away. But there are two instances where the will does not control. So number one, if you have beneficiary designations on assets, that takes precedence over the will. And number two, if you have any assets in a living trust, that takes precedence over the will. Okay? So will sets forth where your assets go. It's good to have. Now what if you say to me, I have beneficiaries on everything and we put the house in a trust, I don't need a will. And I'm gonna look down at your finger, do you have a diamond engagement ring? You know, where does that go? You know what I'm saying? All these things that you don't think about, and I would say invariably, not all the time, but almost all the time, clients forget about something. So it was just this week, a client forgot about Israeli bonds. Totally forgot that Dad had these, and we have to probate that. So with a living trust, we can actually just avoid probate altogether. But a will should be there and work with a trust. And if you have a living trust, which I'm going to get to in a minute, a typical will be a pour over will. That's a will that if you don't have beneficiaries and assets are not in a trust, then assets will pour over into the living trust after death. So that's like, a pour over will is like the catch-all for later on. And that's very important. So we have a last will and testament, where your assets go when you pass away. And as you age, very importantly, you want a very special power of attorney. It's a sophisticated elder law and estate planning power of attorney. But if you need it only to go to a closing, you could use the form, because you don't need all those extra provisions that we have, and make sure that the real estate portion is checked. If it's real estate, if it's a co-op, make sure that the corporate, you know what a co-op is, you don't need me to explain that to you. shares of a corporation allocated to a unit, and a proprietary lease. But you would need to check off the boxes on real estate, probably all of the boxes on the statutory form, but especially real estate, stock and share transactions, corporate transactions, etc., if it's a co-op. So you don't really need a fancy power of attorney if it's just for someone else to sign docs at a closing. But as you age, you really need a special power of attorney so planning can be done. What kind of planning? Long-term care planning, estate planning. We want to protect assets. We may need to modify a trust that we already did. We may need to create a new trust, or maybe even to revoke a prior trust. Can't do any of this without a revision to the statutory power of attorney form. We need a more sophisticated power of attorney. The list goes on and on. You need a provision to disclaim assets. For long-term care planning, the intent to return home to protect your home later on. We put that in every power of attorney. And a power of attorney, people don't realize, but the power of attorney works with the living trust. In almost all of our living trusts, we give more freedoms to the creator of the trust, even with the irrevocable trust. And one of those would be a power to appoint. Let's say you have an irrevocable trust and you want to give money to grandchildren, you have 5 grandchildren. And I'm bringing this up because this is what I had yesterday. I don't have to go too far back in time. And my client said, I want to leave out one grandchild, in my will, because he's a drug addict. He's impossible. I thought he was clean, and he's a mess. I know this money will go, and not for good things. So I told her, you could leave to him, but in a living trust. But she said, absolutely not. I'm not leaving anything to him, not even in a living trust, to protect the money from himself. So, but let's say that money was in the irrevocable trust, and we had a power of attorney that enabled the agent on that power of attorney to correct that. In the irrevocable trust, with this power of appointment, we could actually cut out the grandchild, even if the trust is irrevocable. We could change beneficiaries, even if the trust is revocable. And what many people don't realize, with the help of the power of attorney and provisions in the trust, because if you're thinking, who would ever want to sign something that's irrevocable? Well, we could even have provisions that let you revoke the irrevocable trust. So leave it to attorneys to figure that out. So the power of attorney is a very powerful document. When you look at it and you say, I'll just download a form. You can for a real estate closing, but don't do it. As somebody ages, you need all those other provisions. I would say for anyone that's 50 plus. You really need those extra provisions for things that will crop up as you age. Okay. And everybody knows what a power of attorney is, right? No secret. It's a principal-agency relationship. It's where the principal, let's say it's my power of attorney, I'm the principal. I'll give my son Josh the right to handle my finances, even if I can't handle anything any longer. That's called the durable power of attorney. I give him the right to stand in my shoes, to do all of these things. But what I'm advocating, if you're over 50, is an expanded power, so that we never have to go to court. God forbid something happens to me, never have to go to court for a guardianship action, which is costly. The judge breathes down your neck. There are accountings that you have to give to the judge periodically, and especially every year. If you don't need it, with a good power of attorney, you don't even have to think about that, and you'll be in good shape. So it's where a principal gives the right to an agent to handle financial matters. But those matters also include long-term care planning, Medicaid planning, estate tax planning, etc. So we expand it so our clients know that they'll never have to go in for a guardianship action and be stuck again. The next document is a simple document. So the power of attorney, for a closing, we're good. You could use the form. But if you're over 50, or you're a doctor, you need a state tax planning, you have several $1,000,000, you need a much more sophisticated power of attorney. Healthcare proxy. Unlike the power of attorney, you don't need a lawyer for the healthcare proxy. It's a very simple document. You could download it, and it's basically where you set forth and give the right to someone else to make your healthcare decisions if you can't make them one day. Very simple. And you cherry pick, you hand pick who you're gonna name. You know, and so who do you have to name? Someone that you trust to make the decisions that you want. If you're gonna name, let's say, a child who will never pull the plug, but you don't want to be kept alive artificially if there's no chance of recovery, and if you're gonna name a child that's gonna keep you alive and that's not what you want, what do you have to do? Name someone else, right? So think about who you're naming. You don't need a lawyer to do the healthcare proxy, but it's a very powerful document that everyone should have. We do draft them for our clients, but you don't need us for it. Okay. Next is a living will. It's a document which sets forth what your healthcare wishes are. So the last will and testament, where your assets go when you pass away. The living will, what your healthcare wishes are while you're living. And like I just said, I don't want to be kept alive artificially if there's no chance of recovery. But what if I did want to be kept alive? I have a lot of clients, not a lot, but some, that say that. And Ted Williams, remember the baseball player? Guess what he said? I want to be kept alive as long as I possibly can. And he had money. Guess what he signed up for? Cryogenics. So once he died, they put him on ice, and there he remains. So one day, maybe they could resurrect him, and I don't think the Mets or Yankees need him anymore. Not this year, thank God we're doing pretty well. But seriously, that's what he wanted. It's legal. It costs a lot of money. So that's what he chose. So you could do whatever you want. But your agent, your proxy, has to know what your wishes are. The healthcare proxy agent, the proxy needs to make your decisions. It's your body. So the living will sets forth what your wishes are. Now the last document is the living trust. And anyone that has a decent amount of assets should have a living trust or a home. Typically, you know, it's just anyone that has a home and more than 100, 200,000 should have a living trust, you know, for the most part. Now, what does a trust do? You might say, well, it avoids probate. It does. It's a great way to do it. Today we had a firm meeting. You know, we have educational meetings for the firm. And today the topic was, what if someone contests your trust or will? Number one, if you have assets in a living trust, it's much harder to contest. And even if somebody did contest, it's much harder to win a lawsuit if the home and other assets are in a living trust. So yeah, you avoid probate. It's much, much harder to contest an asset for a number of reasons if it's in a living trust. What else does a living trust do? Any ideas? It protects assets. Let's say you have a home. Now I want to talk about a home. Who pays for long-term care? And I'm going to tie this into the home right now. Number one, you could pay for it privately, right? The average cost of 1 month in a nursing home, God forbid if you need it in New York, is about $20,000. Had a client yesterday, he's out on Long Island, 20,000. A client earlier in the week in Queens, 18,500. You know, it's all close to 20,000 a month for that. What about home care? It also is very, very expensive, even home care. Just do the math. If you, even for companion care, let's say it's $40 an hour, and how many hours do you need? Just 10. That's $400 a day times 30, and that's not even 24/7 or even coming close to it. So even long-term care at home is very expensive. But privately paying for that is one way to pay for it. Medicare does not cover long-term care. It'll cover a little home care. You know, if you break a hip, they'll cover a little bit of home care with physical therapy, occupational therapy. They'll cover it a little bit, but not long-term. Definitely not long-term. What about long-term care insurance? It's great, but what are the insurance companies doing? I don't know if anybody has experience with this, but long-term care insurance companies are raising rates. I had a client in yesterday. It's a crazy case. He and his wife were both diagnosed with something. He with Parkinson's and the wife with dementia, just within the last 6 weeks. And they have long-term care insurance. Wonderful. They had a lifetime benefit, you know, all of this, and good numbers like X amount per day. It was almost 600 a day. The insurance company raised their rates from, it was about, together, about 18,000-ish, but they raised their rates over the next few years. Guess what they raised the rate to? From about 18,000 to, what do you think? 25. That would be, that would be disgusting. Who said 37?
Me.
That would be totally disgusting, but you know what? They raised it more than double 37. It was 87 freaking, sorry, because I don't curse, I say freaking. So $87,000 for my client. I am serious.
Oh my
A
God.
month?
No, a year.
Oh,
Hey, sorry.
Still terrible.
Yeah, still terrible. Yeah.
What if you can't pay that? Can you opt out and get the money?
No,
you pay
so if you
already?
can't pay it, they give you options. We'll lower your monthly amount that we're gonna cover, and instead of lifetime, we'll make it 3 years.
So that's what I mean.
So, you know, these people in their 80s, they've been paying for this about 30 years into the system for now. These people happen to, you know, they're not very wealthy, but they can pay it. I can't tell you how many clients cannot pay it.
That's insane.
It's insane, insane. So, I love long-term care insurance. I even have long-term care insurance,
But why?
but it's
Why
getting
do you like
ridiculous.
Because I'll tell you, not the same story, but a regular life story where someone paid into the system for decades for long-term care, then they wound up needing it, and the amount of care that they could get for that dollar amount was terrible.
Yeah.
Had they taken all that money and put it in an investment account, and they would have made money on it and been able to pay for their own care.
Right. Yeah.
That was not worth it at all, because it
Well,
was hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, it's
Over the course of 40
absolutely.
years.
And look at this one client.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
not
And
good.
this was, seriously, that's exactly the number, and it was just yesterday when I saw the client. So, anyway, it's just ridiculous. So, people want to rely on the Medicaid system. And we can actually protect the home and protect other assets pretty simply. For anyone over 50, 55, there's ways that we could do it. I want to talk about it right now. How much time do I have?
Go ahead, you're good.
I'm good? Oh, okay, thanks. So just a couple of moments about Medicaid. So Medicaid is means tested. It means that you can't be Bill Gates and go on Medicaid, because the asset level to be eligible for Medicaid long-term care is about $32,000. Nothing. And you could keep other assets. What other classes of assets can you keep that are exempt? One is retirement accounts in payout status. So about 20 years ago, I had a Queens case, and a client had retirement accounts, and Medicaid's rule was that retirement accounts are assets that you have to use towards your care before Medicaid would pay, for your care. And I challenged New York City, in this Queens case, and basically without a lawsuit or a fair hearing, they agreed. So briefs going back and forth. So after that, retirement accounts in payout status, you're just taking distributions over your life expectancy, that account is exempt from Medicaid. That's good. What about the home? The home is exempt from Medicaid. If you're getting home care, the home is exempt if the equity value is $1,097,000 or less. Okay, it's just the rule. Or it could be any amount. If there's a spouse living in the home, minor, blind, or disabled child living in the home. But what if there's a home valued at more than $1.1 million? It's $1,097,000, I rounded off. Then they say you have too much money. If there's no spouse in the home, etc., you have too much money to go on Medicaid. So if you have a mortgage of $500,000, that's okay, your equity is less. But they look at the equity and they say if it's $1,097,000 or more, you have too much money for Medicaid. So we want to do planning with the home, right? It's really important. So here's how we could do planning for Medicaid. There are exempt ways you could transfer assets. We have a lot of tricks up our sleeve, and I love what I'm doing, not only because I'm helping people, but because it's so creative. There are so many different ways to go and protect assets for my clients, but I just want to give you a simple case, how we protect assets, and especially the home, for a client. So if a client comes in to see me, not a very wealthy client, but I'm going to talk about a wealthy client in a couple of moments. But if a client comes in to see me and wants to protect the home and let's say other assets. So let me give you a scenario. Let's say the home is valued at, give me a value.
1.5.
1.5. Okay, that's a good listing, right? Go get it.
Every day.
You take it every day?
Take it every
All right, good. So the home is valued at $1.5 million, but they bought this 40 years ago. That's our old clients. What did they pay for it? 40 or 50,000. Now, those of you who are not in the business might say, that's crazy, but those are the real numbers. So bought the home for 40,000. It's valued at 1.5. So I have to think about drafting that trust correctly so Medicaid doesn't say it's an asset, but I have to draft that trust correctly to make sure there are no, what kind of taxes? Capital gains taxes, right? Because that's huge. And I want to protect the home in the trust. What if the individual wants to sell during lifetime? I want to make sure they get, husband and wife, the $500,000 capital gains tax exclusion. So you guys should know it's section 121A of the IRS code. And it actually spells it out in English. Usually the IRS code is not in English, but this is pretty much in English, which is really good. So we draft a trust for all of that. And so, if we do planning, there's $1.5 million home, we typically would say, let's take that home and put it into a Medicaid irrevocable asset protection trust. And that home is out for Medicaid, but we get all of the tax advantages, which is, upon death, a basis step up, right? From 40,000, but then capital improvements raise the basis. You know those basics. But upon death, the basis moves up to the value at the time of death, so no capital gains tax. And it's out for Medicaid. And you avoid probate. And what if you have a disabled child? We put a special needs trust right within that Medicaid trust. What if you have a child that is on drugs and you do want to provide for him? We have a spendthrift trust. We don't give it to that child, but we put assets in a trust and it's doled out, and the trustee doesn't give it to this child that might be on drugs, but pays for things that he needs. Okay. So, and what if you want to give to grandchildren? Like my client who just cut out a grandchild because of drugs, but what about other grandchildren that don't have an issue? Do you want to give them at age 18, the age of majority? Most people don't. They want to say, all right, maybe at age 25, or maybe a third at 21, and a third at 25, and a third at 30, so they could learn slowly how to get used to managing money, etc. So with the home, typical planning, we'll put the home in a living trust and protect it and make sure we have the tax advantages. Also, income tax advantages, like the senior citizens exemptions, right? The VA exemption, right? So all of the tax advantages we will preserve in that irrevocable living trust. And if you're speaking to a client who says, oh my God, I'm gonna get an ulcer thinking that anything is irrevocable and I can't change it, we could draft that trust in a way so that you could revoke that irrevocable trust. Okay, just so you know. Okay, what if that client has 500,000, just picking an average person, 500,000 in retirement accounts? What could we do with that? I already told you. Remember I told you?
That's exempt.
What?
That's exempt.
That's right. So what do we do with it?
Give it to the children.
You do nothing with it. But that's right. You do eventually give it to the children. So after my case, retirement accounts, whether it's 50,000, 500,000, or $1 million, even for Medicaid, you're going to keep it. It's exempt. And you just need to take distributions over your life expectancy. In New York City, Queens will accept the lifetime chart. So you take your little distributions, but you're projecting that 500,000 or 750, whatever the retirement account is, it's protected. Okay, but what you take might be budgeted, would be typically budgeted on the Medicaid budget. Okay, now so we already, let's say it's 500,000. Home is $1.5 million. That's already a $2 million estate, and we're talking about Medicaid, and we're protecting assets, and there's no skin off anyone's back because you're just going to live in the home, right? And your retirement accounts are exempt. So, Helen, on an average person, how much in other liquid assets might they have?
They
It
could
could
have,
be anything.
yeah,
But
I didn't
give
even
me a
realize
number.
this is invaluable information.
Huh?
I didn't
Give me
even
a number,
realize
I'll work
you could
with it.
work Medicaid like
2
this.
million.
2 million?
Yeah, 2 million.
That's a lot for Medicaid. However, it's fine. Let's say this, I'm gonna do like another 500,000, but let's say it's 2 million. Let me do this first. So $2 million, so that's a $4 million estate. If you would ask anyone, you're doing Medicaid planning with a $4 million estate, you've gotta be out of your mind. And they said, well, what's the amount of assets you can keep? Well, 32,000. With a $4 million estate and 32,000, you're out of your mind. But you can plan as well. So here's how we might do it. We look to see what other assets, just like the home in your example, might have a capital gain. Let's say, let's fantasize, you bought Apple stock at the IPO when it first came out. Anybody here do that?
Nope.
No, I know. Oh, well. You wouldn't be. You might be here, you never know.
Be zooming in from
Yeah, yeah, Tahiti, right. So, well, anyway, let's pretend, because that's a nice pretend, right? So let's pretend you got Apple, you just got a few shares at the IPO, and it cost you $10,000. Well, that's probably 2 million now. So we would put, It's probably a lot more
That's the
than
Probably
message.
more than that.
That's the message I'm leaving with you today. It's the vote.
Buy Apple stock? It's not from me, don't blame me. Anyway, so if it's Apple stock, we'll have them put that, just like the home, in the same trust. It's out for Medicaid, but we're gonna get the basis step up later on, right? Could always be sold if you wanna sell it, but that will also go in the same trust. And the client says, look, I got 2 million in the bank, you're not gonna leave me with nothing, are you? I'll tell them, I'll leave you with whatever you wanna be left with. You know, the more you put into this trust, the more protection you have. But I said, would you feel comfortable keeping 500,000? He'll say, no, I want more, 750. Maybe he'll say, okay. So let's say he wants to keep 732,000. There's a reason why I gave such an odd number. The rest goes into the trust. We get a basis step up. Same thing. He could also get the income on that in the Medicaid trust too. Not so terrible. And upon death, a basis step up on everything in the trust. What about the 732,000? That is not protected. But out of a $4 million estate, so far we've protected about 3.25, right? And there's a way we could even at the worst case basis, protect half of that 700,000 left. Don't forget you could have 32,000, so now we're talking about 700,000. At the absolute worst case basis, if there's no spouse, because if there is a spouse, there's always a way to protect. But let's say there's no spouse, we could protect more than probably everything except for about 300,000. Not bad, not bad. Getting the income on everything, the retirement accounts, the Apple stock, everything, because there's a way to protect a little more than half at the very last minute, the way we do it. So, not bad. So even somebody with a $2 million estate, the planning makes sense. Now, if God forbid somebody needs a nursing home for 1 year, the average cost is around $20,000. We're talking about $250,000. So if we do this, and let's say this is the worst case basis, because there are a lot of other creative ways to plan. But if this is it, we're saving 3.7 out of a $4 million estate. And there's not much skin off anyone's back. They're getting all their income. You could sell the stock, you could buy other stock, you could do whatever you want. And that's typically how we would plan. If our client has 500,000 in liquid and not 2 million, makes it a lot simpler. We could protect almost everything. Let's say I want to keep 200,000 in my name. Great, we'll protect everything except for about 75,000. Not bad, out of a $2.5 million estate with a home at 1.5, retirement accounts at 500,000 and another 500,000. So that's very simple. And when there's a spouse, we could protect anything. So you gave me a little harder of a case, because $2 million liquid plus, but it's fine. And people need to do that planning, because when a client comes to me, like years ago, when I started to do this planning, they said, oh, I have $1 million. I could pay for my care and everything for the rest of my life. Then I probably would have said, yeah, that's a lot of money. But now when someone says I have $1 million, I said, we can't even cover the 5-year look back, which I'm happy to talk about if there's time, or should I stop soon? Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, so we do the Medicaid planning, and you should know there are some gifts that you could make that are exempt, such as gifts to a spouse, gifts to a disabled child. Gift to children are not exempt from Medicaid. No. So,
Every year, they have a.
yes,
certain
every
amount,
year.
100,000.
So let me get into this. So long-term care planning is important. But what if a wealthy doctor comes in to see me, and I'm gonna call you guys, for the listing, but, hopefully you could get that wealthy doctor a good home. But he comes in to see me and says, well, I have $10 million in my name, my wife has 15 million in her name, we wanna do planning, so we wanna do estate tax planning. Right now, so let me just go over the numbers and I'll finish in 5 minutes. So right now, the federal estate tax exemption is 13.99 million. That is scheduled to go down by half to about 7 million plus inflation at the end of the year. President Trump, whether you like him or don't like him, is trying very hard for that not to happen. So all of these cuts and everything that's going on, for the main purpose is to keep these tax, like the exemption, to keep it at, he doesn't want to keep it at 14 million, he wants to raise it to 15 in that big, beautiful bill. So where will that estate tax level be at the end of the year? Either 15 million in President Trump's bill, 14 million where it is now, because it's 13.99, where it is now, or according to current law, and this is President Trump's own bill that was done in 2017, it'll go down in half and be 7 million. Okay? So we don't really know what's happening yet. Okay? And now it's, I feel like it's a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Those Superman movies? It's Elon Musk, it's Batman versus Superman or whatever, who are the bad guys, Kryptonite and all of this, Elon Musk versus President Trump, but we'll see what happens to that bill. I thought that bill was just a shoo-in, maybe it's not anymore, we'll see, we'll have to see what happens.
Why they wanna do that?
Who wants to do what?
To reduce the amount to have.
What? Because it's already in the bill that was done in 2017. It's in the bill to make it half because they weren't able to balance the budget with keeping it permanent. So they said, by the end of 2025, everything is, everything that was halved will go back to full.
In other words, this was.
It was already in the law. It's the law right now.
In 2017.
Yes.
From 2017, said the end of 2025, everything sunsets, it goes back to where it was.
And it protects, just explain maybe that it protects the very, very wealthy people.
It protects wealthier people, yeah. Now, unlike Florida, where someone here lives in Florida, unlike Florida, that doesn't have an estate tax, New York State has an estate tax.
Yes.
And the freebie, the exemption, is 7.16 million. Now you see where, if you read, the estate tax level is 14 million, and that big, beautiful bill, it's gonna be 15 million. Wait a second. New York State, we gotta deal with 7 million. Federal law says that if you have husband and wife, each have, for federal estate, each have the 13.99 million. And when one dies, if you use only 2 million, you could transfer over the other 12 million after death. It's called portability. New York State doesn't have that. So we have to do some fancy planning to make sure we get the full exemption for New York State. New York State is not gonna go down, it's just gonna go up with inflation, and there's no portability. Okay, so we have to do planning around that. So for your wealthier clients, we need to do estate tax planning. For my example, if one spouse has 7, the other spouse, has 7, and you might say, but the federal level is 14 million. We don't have to worry. Well, number one, it might go down to half. We don't know. But even if it stays there, New York State is already at half, 7.16 million, and we have to deal with that. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a primer, on what trusts do, elder law, planning for long-term care, little bit on estate tax issues. And I want to thank Helen so much for inviting me here, Ross.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you guys for coming and listening. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I think this shows us what we don't know, right? And certainly every time, especially our agents, you meet with your homeowners. Not that you're gonna spout off all this, but you're gonna say, you should talk to an expert because there's just so much and the way these laws are changing.
Yeah.
So even what you thought you knew, you don't really know.
Thank you, Helen.
Planning is important. We'll come back for questions if you don't mind after we finish and then.
No, not at all.
So kind of hold your thoughts there, if you wouldn't mind. You know, I'm just gonna do a really quick segue on housing because Russ is gonna do something simple here and then we're gonna go on to Tina. But they've studied that where you live, your environment, where you're nurtured, you're safe, you're comfortable, you're emotionally taken care of, it affects how you age, how you grow old, and how long you go. So, you know, where we live matters, as you go forward here. So Ross, pick up a couple of things. Most people, let me just say one thing, most people do wanna remain in their home. And that's certainly a huge option for people, and there are ways to look at it, so he's just gonna kind of weigh that.
Yeah, so we discussed, we came up with like 5 good questions to go over amongst you, your family members, your team. You know, to number 1, you should take an in-depth look at your living situation, your total costs for maintenance, utilities, insurance, and anticipated upgrades that are needed. You know, aging in your home and aging in place, you know, the costs for repairs could skyrocket over your time, so you may want to talk to your mother, your father, your siblings, whoever's going to take care of you, and say, okay, what's our best location to live in? You know, think more in a 5 to 10 year plan, because as you get older, your needs may change. You know, so start, just because you came up with a plan today doesn't mean it should be your plan forever. You know, it can be revisited every 5 to 10 years. You know, possible changes include health situations, financial or family situations. Would adapting the home, you know, with ramps and lifts, you know, be a better opportunity than some of this long-term care or assisted livings. Start researching and discussing different lifestyle options and locations, things to keep in mind. You know, where do our family and friends live? You don't want to be isolated. Having a good support system is important. What's attractive to you? You know, is it climate? Is it, you know, convenience of grocery stores or doctors or hospitals? What Helen mentioned before, you know, having the 70-40 conversation is important when most of, at least in my situation, right, when my parents are in their 70s, you know, my sister and I are in our 40s, and when everybody's of good mental state, you know, relatively good health, you know, good physical condition, these are a good time to talk to, you know, have this family conversation and discuss, you know, what are your plans, what are your wishes, what do you prefer, you know, your healthcare options and caregiving options look like. Is the plan to get out of New York and move to Florida? Is it to stay where we are, you know, with a lot of familiar, you know, surroundings? And last but not least, develop your team, you know, people like Ron, you know, and the other law, you know, your financial advisor, your realtors are important, your geriatric care managers, your licensed contractors, your handymans. All these people are part of your team that can make your planning and decisions, make your planning and decision more well-rounded and really, you know, feel confident that you at least have a plan moving forward.
Okay, so you know, that housing, we can always go over it another time. I want to take you right on to this segue here to Tina, because whether you're staying in your home, you're downsizing, you're making a move for retirement or other living areas, Tina's gonna take over here. She is the COO of Stow and Behold. She's run her own business for 12 years. She's a pro. And she had an illustrious career before that in public relations, yeah? And she was in the Peace Corps. She's quite a talent. But I'm gonna let you take over.
Thank you very much. So my name is Tina O'Keefe, and I am the COO and founder of Stow and Behold. COO is the Chief Organizing Officer. I made that up and I put it on a business card so everyone believes it. So that's how we kind of roll here in the organizing world. Just to give you some background, I do have a background in writing, and going to representing a client and going to a conference is how I became an organizer. An organizer spoke at the conference, and a light bulb went off. I didn't know that that was something that you could do for a living, and so I approached her afterwards, started working for her part-time, and then couldn't sustain 3 jobs at that time in my life, so I took a pause, and then 3 children later, what was I going to do? I wanted to re-engage, I wanted to challenge myself, and my husband said, I will tell you, you were very happy when you were doing that organizing. My husband is also chronically disorganized, so he thought, wow, what a great idea. If you organize for other people, you will leave my stuff alone. So this has been a symbiotic relationship for 12 years, and as long as I'm busy, he's happy. So please send me referrals. He'll be very happy. Busy parents like myself at the time, and I approached them outside of the school, and I said, I will organize for you in exchange for before and after pictures, and for free. And they said, absolutely not. They all said no. And I was very disheartened. I said, wow, this is a terrible industry if I can't give the service for free. And I found out that people were embarrassed. 12 years ago, Marie Kondo was not on the landscape. Organizing was still a little bit embarrassing. It was still hoarders, really, on TV. The home ed and all those beautiful things weren't there yet. So the idea of organizing being fun and beautiful and something that everyone's doing was not a thing. It was kind of like, oh, I'm embarrassed about my piles of stuff. So they did not want to let someone that they know go into their home and see these piles. But they were very quick to say, my mom needs help, my dad needs help, my uncle needs help. And that's how I got into the senior space of helping seniors. I do help clients of all shapes and sizes, but I do primarily focus on seniors and people with physical challenges. And what I learned was that in my community, there are many, many people who live in big homes and feel a little bit trapped. Maybe they want to make a change, maybe they want to live a little bit differently, and they can't because they physically cannot manage the clutter in the home. And so, they have children who live in the area, but those children work full time. And on Saturday, the last place they want to be is in the basement of mom and dad going through their stuff. And when they do, they take that stuff and say, why did you keep this? This is so stupid. I can't believe it. You are such a hoarder. And then they fight, and then they call the organizer. So that's often how I get a lot of my clients. And it's natural, and it happens because your stuff, is very personal to you. A comedian once said, your stuff is your stuff, and everyone else's stuff is S-H-I-T, excuse me. And that was George Carlin. And it's true, when it's your stuff, it's important to you. You know why you kept it. There is significance. But when it's someone else's, it's challenging. So in the landscape of your home, I help clients who are preparing to move. I help clients who are recovering from a move. And then I help clients who want to stay where they are and be happier and healthier there. And so really, that's a question, as we were just talking about, the 70-40 rule. There's a time you have that conversation and say, do you want to stay here? Is there somewhere else you want to go? And then what help do you need? And being, understanding what kind of help to ask for, because there's different ways to get help. You can have a family member help you. And I always tell people, if you do that, you really should understand, set your parameters. When I work with a client, the client is the decision maker. And that is, everyone wants to organize. They think it's great fun to organize. Oh, I'd love to go into your house and organize it. But organizing is always done as a partnership. The person whose stuff it is, I partner with them because they have to make the decision. Whether that person is a senior, whether they're young or old or even a child, they have to say, yes, I will, I don't need this anymore. And if they want to keep it, well, why do you want to keep it? Where should it live? Does it need to live here? So we ask these kinds of questions. So it's really important to do it together. So you can have a family member or friend help you and just say, listen, I need your help. I know what I need, but I physically can't do it. So I'd like you to be my arms and my legs, and but it's my stuff and I'm gonna make the decisions, and try to be clear about that. You can also bring in someone like a caretaker, a cleaning person, a handyman even. Someone who has like a little bit of muscle to help you bring the boxes down so you could go through them. And that person is going to be a great advantage to you. You have to pay them, but they will execute what you'd like. The problem is you need to know the path. So you have to have a vision. And if you don't, they're looking to you for guidance. And then the last one is you can bring in someone like a professional organizer who is going to help you develop systems and processes. And that's what I do. So I'm not a handyman, I'm not a cleaning person. I'm there to help you make decisions. I'm there to help you prevent clutter. If there's clutter there, we're going to diminish it, but we're also going to say, why was this here? And try to prevent it from happening again. And for people who are selling, often I do work with real estate agents, I work with elder care attorneys, estate attorneys, geriatric care managers, patient advocates, all different people who are in the home. And ultimately, this person, they can't stay here anymore, they need to move, the family wants to move them, and they don't know where to start. And that's often when I get called in. It's like, we strategize, we don't just talk, we strategize, but we do it. We take the stuff out and we make the decisions. I also have clients who have moved, they're in an assisted living, someone dumped the boxes there, and the family had to go, they're far away, there wasn't time to really help them settle. So going in and unpacking the boxes, working with the facility to make it a comfortable space for them so that they are healthy and happy in their new home. And then the people who want to stay where they are and age in place, which is very common, making sure that the obstacles to staying at home are gone. The bumpy, the old bumpy rugs that you trip over, a lot of extra furniture because, there is generations of people who you never gave anything away, you never threw anything out because you might need it again. And so you have a lot of chairs. There's a lot of chairs everywhere and little tables, cute little tables. And at the end of the day, if you fall or something happens and someone can't come into your home and have easy access to help you get out in an emergency, all of those things are triggers for emergencies and accidents. So really walking through the home with experts. If someone's moving, I always say, can we have the real estate agent here? I'll follow them around with a clipboard and we'll make all the changes so that your house is sellable. And whatever clutter there is, we'll deal with it together. If someone is staying in their home and there might be obstacles or dangers, I say to them, please, let's work with the care manager. What are the things here that you think, would block or impede, an emergency access of a first responder? And so then we say, okay, can we compromise here? You want to keep the lovely secretary that belongs to your mother, but maybe some of these extra chairs that you're not attached to, we can donate. And the key is when I say donate. So a lot of people, the fear is that after a lifetime of happiness and memories in their home, you are gonna roll up the dumpster in front of their house and start throwing out all of their possessions. I'm not saying that this doesn't happen, but ideally, when you have a lot of time to plan, the earlier the better, you can make better and smarter decisions. I don't always push for selling items, but definitely donation is the carrot that is the wonderful incentive for somebody to give their stuff away and say, you know what, I don't need this anymore, but someone else could use it and I'd be very happy to donate it. And I do have a lot of expertise. I liaise with tons of charities. I go to nonprofit events all the time. And my background in the Peace Corps has me very service oriented. So I'm always looking for organizations that are looking for stuff, your beautiful stuff. Your clothes, your shoes, your towels, your linens, your old electronics, your old crayons. There are so many things that we can donate. If you name it, I can find a place for it. I guarantee it. So that's what I kind of do. And by using the donation impetus, there's a generation of people that belong to the Lions Club, the Rotary, all these civic associations, and they are service-minded people. And so when you say, we are going to make good in the community, we're going to take your stuff and donate it, it makes them feel really great because that's what they've been doing their whole life. They've been working, they've served in the armed forces or whatever it is that they've done. It makes them feel great to say, actually, I can still help people by giving my stuff to them and by donating. So this is a great opportunity to do that. And so I encourage it. So we walk around the home and we donate the pieces of furniture, the artwork, the bric-a-brac, the clothing, whatever it is, and then we make this space comfortable for them so that maybe they can have an aide living in the home with them full-time if they need that. You create a space for them, or just in general. I mean, I have clients who an aide is offered to them and the aide has shown up and said, I cannot stay here until this home is cleaned up. And so the agency has called me and said, can you come and help them so that they can get the help? Can you help so they can get the help? I've had a family call me and say, and I don't advocate, lying to anybody, but it was done before I arrived at the home. The family was told that they cannot get help until someone from the New York City Department of Aging comes and makes sure that the house is clean. They told them that I was the person from the New York City Department of Aging, which I am not. I am an independent contractor, but I arrived and they had already been told that I was the inspector and I was going to make the house neat or else they wouldn't be able to get the aid. And so I felt a little bit uncomfortable with the lie, but it was a fire under the father who did not want to organize, and we got the job done, and they were able to get an aide. So it was a good outcome. But I hopefully, no, you don't have to lie to clients and family members to have an organizer come, but sometimes, you know, you have to put pressure on if you really want them to be in a safe, comfortable environment. I am not as good as Ron in terms of not being able to go without a PowerPoint. I don't want to get off topic, but I do feel like it is really, I encourage people to organize. If you have someone in your home or your family who doesn't want to organize, if you feel like they want the service but they're reluctant to get going, if you live with them, I always say, you know, buying someone a gift certificate to organizing is like a gift certificate to Weight Watchers. They may want to lose weight, but they don't want you to tell them that. So the idea is, you know, don't buy them organizing, don't bring in the organizer. Bring the organizer in for yourself. Let them see the process, let them see how great it is, and then usually it will come. I have found that in many of my clients. I had a client whose boyfriend, his parents were hoarders, and they did something, I don't know if you've seen this before, they did this famous move where they had a 3-story home in Glendale, and one day they packed up a suitcase and they handed the keys to their child and said, the kingdom is yours, and they left. And they left closets, garages, full, everything, floor to ceiling, boxes, everything, and they just said, they got a beautiful new condo, and they said, life is good, and son, it's all you. Now, son is a teacher. He collects comic books. He collects memorabilia. And so all of a sudden, he now moves into this home with his parents' stuff there and brings more into the home. He's an English teacher. He loves books. He loves paper. It's a problem. And now he has a girlfriend, and she really loves him, and he wants her to move in. And she calls and says, I want to move in. There is no space. Literally, physically, there is no space for me in the home. I don't know what to do. Can you help him? And I said, look, you can talk to him. I can talk to him, but ultimately he has to want me to come there. I cannot do this without his permission. These are his things. I will tell you, if you want to hire me, let him see you organize, and then maybe he'll be inspired. So we tried this. She moved in, she called 6 months later and said, I'm in the house. There's no space. I have one closet. All my stuff is crammed in there. Can you help me at least make this closet better? So that's what we did, and I showed up, and he was very reluctant, very unhappy to have me there, but we got it done. You know, I went into the room, I said, I'm not gonna touch any of your stuff. If I do, I'm going to ask you. And he kept peeking in the room and looking at what I was doing, and we talked at length about comic books, about movies. I have a lot of interest in science fiction, just like him, so we had a lot in common, and he started to feel more comfortable with me, and after the first session, her closet looked great. He was a little bit inspired. The next time I went, we worked on the dining room, the 3 of us together. We had some great ideas. I said, you know, instead of putting your beautiful collection in boxes all over, why don't you take them out and make your dining room into a hall of heroes? Put pedestals around and display all of these very expensive and very, you know, beautiful collections of movie items you have. And he loved that idea. And so we cleaned out the dining room, refurbished the table, and were able to make it a display place for a lot of what he was collecting. He got really excited, and we kept going, and we went through this whole house, and they got engaged, they got married, and they adopted 2 little boys. And so it was absolutely, like, for me, a really great happy ending to a very controversial start where parents you know, leave a house to their kids with all the stuff in it. So, and sometimes, you know, sometimes people don't know what to do. A certain generation, maybe the kind of help that I'm offering wasn't available to them. So I do encourage people, and I tell my seniors all the time, you know, your home should be, you know, I wanna tell your story. I wanna curate and showcase the items that you love and care about. I don't want someone to walk into your home and see, you know, stacks of magazines and newspapers. I want them to see the awards you've won, the beautiful things you've collected from traveling around the world, your trophies, your certificates, like all of that should be on display, and all of this trash and minutia, you know, should go away, and let's flip it. So we're not trying, it's not about getting rid of your life, it's about celebrating it more. And so that's kind of what I really try to encourage with my clients. I could go on forever about organizing.
You know,
Yes.
many seniors like have, you know, photographs that they collected their entire life, so boxes and boxes and boxes. What is a technique that you have found to help people so that they can keep their memories? What's worked best for you?
Right,
with
so
your
I will
clients?
say, we live in a conundrum right now where if you print back in the day we'd print photos. We'd print a lot of photos because you didn't know what they were gonna look like before you printed them. A photo was a mystery. Now you take a picture, right away, well, that's a terrible picture. But you used to take 5 pictures and then get your pictures back and realize that your thumb was in all of them. So now we live in a different time. So now we take so many pictures, but now they live in a place that's almost unseen. You're often, if you're not sharing them on social media or in other places, they're sort of trapped in your device. So, and then if you have the printed pictures, they're in boxes, they're in bins, they're heavy and they're cumbersome, and there's hundreds, if not thousands. Slides are another, I encounter I open up a closet and it's boxes of slides from when people used to, put the slides in the projector and project them. So how do we preserve them and share them? I definitely recommend everyone I talk to who's in photography, who's an expert, will tell you all of these media will degrade, and digitizing is definitely the thing that you have to do if you want to preserve no matter what. So holding reels of 8mm and all that, over time, even in the best conditions, they'll start to degrade. So really digitizing is very important. But then once you digitize, how do you share it? I love these picture frames, these aura frames,
Yes,
or there's a few different ones, but the family can all subscribe. You can send them digitally. You live in Florida and I live in New York, but I can send pictures to your frame, and so everyone can share and look at these pictures, and they rotate, on a display. You set the time, you set the amount of time you want each picture to be on, and it's a great way to share the pictures.
What places can digitize, the printed photographs?
I mean, there's quite a few. A lot of people, there's a few that are advertised. The Legacy Box is one that's like very common. You can send them videos, photographs. They charge you like a certain quantity. You fill a box up, and then they send it back digitized. There's also like more private ones that are, a little bit more high end, a little more expensive, but they're a little bit more, have a little more expertise. It's not as general consumer. So if you Google them, and I do have companies that I work with that I highly recommend here in New York.
I think we're beginning to see why you need experts. I mean, things like organizing that doesn't, you realize the psychological technique she's using here with people that, the average, we're not equipped to do that. So she's perfect, wonderful. Why don't we take a few minutes for questions for Ron and for Tina?
Sure.
Yeah?
Sure.
Erica?
Yeah, so this question is, so how do you figure out like the cost to work with you? Well, how does it work?
So it's interesting because every organizer is different. So I'm just going to give you like my personal experience with it, and it's that I used to do consultations where I'd go to the home, walk around, and try to evaluate, and then estimate how long it would take to work with someone. And there were a few obstacles to that. Number one, if someone has a lot of anxiety about organizing, that visit would be absolutely anxiety provoking. I would think that I am sharing wonderful ideas and bringing peace and tranquility, and in their minds, their hearts are pumping with the idea that I'm gonna go in and not only touch they can't understand and envision that it's gonna be a good outcome for them. They think it's gonna be a terrible, terrible ordeal. So 9 times out of 10, I would leave the home, they'd make an appointment, and then they'd call me and cancel. And I couldn't figure out what was going on, and then I started to realize there is fear in the hearts of these people, and they're not showing it on the outside, but it's there on the inside. And it's not like when a pipe bursts and you call the plumber, you want him to come. Your hair is all, and you want to be the hairstylist. You have very mixed emotions about your organizer. So you want her to come, but you don't want her to come.
Yeah.
And so I stopped doing the consultation. So I started doing something else, which is I do an initial visit where we do everything. We do an assessment, we do a mini session together, and then we clean up, and then we discuss a plan going forward. And the reason why I do that is because, number one, the person gets to work with me and realize that I am not Satan, and that I am not gonna throw all of their stuff in a black garbage bag and run out the door. We're going to do it, and it's gonna be a process. Number two, I can see their decision-making ability, because the estimated amount of time is about the volume and about the decision-making ability of the client. If they're gonna hem and haw over every card in the pile, or have to check every pen in the box, which I have clients who have to check every pen before they can throw it away, then it's gonna take a lot longer. So I get a little window into that, and then we can make a plan together. So it is really, it's on a case-by-case basis, but that initial visit will allow me, and at the end of that visit, I do a plan for you, where I take everything I saw and I write it all down. So if you never wanna see me again, you have a plan that you can then execute on. If you wanna keep working with me, then we can take that plan together and then we do it together. So the client has the option, it's almost like a menu, they can also say, you know what, I can do bedroom and bathroom, but wow, basement, I need you to come back. And so we do it, that's how we kind of do the estimating. I don't know if that answers your
It does,
question.
and then for that first initial visit, how long is that visit? Like,
It's typically, the magic time is 4 hours for a session in my experience. I sometimes do less with seniors, I have a senior who I can only do 2 hours with. She's local, but in 2 hours, she starts to say, I'm feeling angry, and then I usually know that it's time to go. So she's a 2 hour appointment. 3 to 4 is usually the right amount of time to assess, get something done, clean up. So I never wanna leave your home with a pile of clothes on the bed and say, oh, bye, I'll see you later, good luck with that. I always wanna make sure we're cleaned up, and then to have a conversation at the end. So 4 hours is the magic time, unless it's a garage, which has to be in and out in a day due to weather constraints. So garages can usually be anywhere from 6 to 10 hours.
and so then, in that 4 hours, so they pay you in advance, like someone will pay, like how, I'm just,
It depends. My clients are usually word of mouth, they're referrals, so
Yeah.
most of the time, I am not asking for a deposit in advance. If it's a cold client who I've never met and have no connection to, I would ask for a small amount, and then usually people pay at the end of every session. So usually I don't leave until I'm paid, and people usually want me to go.
You're like,
I can stay
you're
here.
not gonna pay me, no problem, New York water rights are in full effect. You're just like, I'm seeing you never leave.
Yes.
I have, sorry, just one second.
Do you physically assist with taking the stuff out of the house, like not couches and chairs, but clothing and shoes and papers?
Yes. I mean, if the client wants me to, I can. Sometimes I try to be savvy and organize donation pickups to coincide either, weather contingent. Like I'll try to get something in the next day or two if the weather is gonna allow for that. We'll put the bags outside, put the note on it, and then let it go. There's shredding companies that come to the home to shred, but it depends. So if again, that initial visit will allow me to see if there's a client who you put the garbage out and then I catch them rooting through the garbage, then the garbage has gotta go with me, and I've had to take away trash, I've had to take away donations because they start shopping, and then we're back where we started again.
Vicky?
That was my question.
Oh,
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Ron.
Sure.
Can you just speak real quick about the 5-year look back?
Sure. The 5-year look back. So once you're in a nursing home, and you're in a nursing home for long-term care or even short-term care, but for long-term care is what we're talking about. So you need to be in a nursing home, your assets have to be at or below the Medicaid level, and then you apply for benefits. So there's 3 things that have to happen to trigger the time for a look back. Then Medicaid looks back to see what assets the applicant, and if there's a spouse, what assets the applicant and the spouse had for the last 5 years. So they're in the nursing home, their assets are down, they apply, then Medicaid looks back 5 years to see what assets the applicant and the spouse had and what assets were gifted away. Because they don't want people to gift away their assets to get down to the $32,000 level, plus the retirement accounts, plus the home could be exempt also. Remember we said up to the $1,097,000. So they look back to see what assets were gifted to get them down to the Medicaid level. And then they say, for every month of nursing home expense, and they set forth that amount at $15,000 about in Queens and Nassau, in this area, it's about, a little different in each region. But they say it's about $15,000 for every month of expense, long-term care expense. It's really 20, but they make it lower because it's a longer penalty period. So let's say somebody in the last 5 years, or including the spouse, gave away $15,000. There'll be a 1 month wait before Medicaid will pay. And the thinking is, you gave away 1 month of care, so you're penalized. You could have saved it for your care later on, but instead you gave it away. There's a 1 month penalty. If they gave away 2 months of care, or 2 times 15,000, there'll be a 2 month wait. If they gave away 150,000, there'll be a 10 month wait. If they gave away a home, which is what you guys know, you live and breathe it, they'll get an appraisal. Depending on the county, they'll let you just do a real estate broker's appraisal with some comps in it, or some counties want you to have a real true appraiser. Then let's say the home is worth, let me say 500,000. I know it's not, it's more than that. They'll say 500,000 divided by 15,000 equals X. That's how long you have to wait. So if it's gonna be a huge number because the home was worth $1.5 million, we know there's gonna be a 5-year wait. So we wanna transfer the home. Remember before I started this, plan, and I said, do it while you can. Don't wait, because you want the 5 years to come and the 5 years to go. So if you had $10 million, it doesn't matter, as long as you can outlive the don't need the care, I should say, for the 5 years. So you want to plan in advance. So that's how it is. But there are exceptions to the rule, there are strategies we could use, but that's what the 5-year look back is. Now, that being said, and I'll be done in a second.
No,
I could be long-winded, but I won't be with this. I'm thorough, right? That's for nursing home care. For home care right now, there is no look back. So let's say I have a home valued at $1 million, and I have $1 million in other assets, not retirement accounts. So I could give everything away right now, put them in the trust, out of my name, and go on Medicaid home care right away. Could be $1 million, it could be $2 million, it could be 500, that doesn't matter. There is no look back for Medicaid home care. There is a 2.5-year look back on the books. About 5 years ago, it was never approved by the federal government. There's a proposal to get rid of that law. We don't know what's gonna happen. But right now, no look back for home care, 5-year look back if you're applying to go into a nursing home.
So just real quick, so if it's a spouse and a wife, and one of them needs to go into long-term care in a nursing home, okay, they haven't planned ahead, this just happens, right? Sometimes
it happens, yeah.
They own a home, the home is not worth $1 million, it's less than $1 million. Is that asset divided between the spouses?
No. If there's a spouse living in the home will be exempt. However, it's crazy not to do planning. If you were ever a caregiver, I think most of us were, I was, to my mother, for years. She had Alzheimer's, she lived in Queens for years I should say, for about 8 years. She didn't know who I was. It was awful, terrible, I lose my train of thought when I think about my mom, seriously. What was the question again?
No, you said if there's a spouse living in the home.
Oh, spouse living in the home.
I'm just
So with a
disappointed 'cause I
spouse
waited so long.
with a spouse living in a home, it's exempt if there's a spouse living in
Or
the home.
disabled child.
However, being a caregiver is so taxing. There are no stats that I know on this, But I will tell you from experience for doing this almost 40 years, the sick spouse many times will not die first because the well spouse is the caregiver and can't take it anymore. I see that all the time. And in my firm, I know it's gonna sound silly, we just say, oh, yeah, you know, it happens all the time. We talk about the sick well spouse that eventually died first. The sick well spouse, that's the term in my firm for. So what you wanna do is plan at least to transfer the home to the well spouse. Now, we could do planning, once we get the sick spouse on Medicaid, let's say if it's a nursing home situation, that's more onerous, because we have the 5-year look back. Assets could be transferred to the spouse, that's exempt. Asset transfers between spouse. Medicaid won't look back on that for the 5 years. That spouse will sign a spousal refusal, where he or she says, I'm not gonna use my money for my spouse. That's legal in New York, and it's federal law. The month after we get eligibility for the sick spouse, we do all sorts of planning to plan to protect the house and other assets the month after eligibility. So we don't wait for a spouse to die, which happens all the time. We don't wait to do any of that. We are proactive and we do the planning. You're welcome.
How about one more question? Anybody? You good?
Yeah.
Yes.
For the son that was on, had a problem, and he wasn't left anything, was there able to be put a clause in there, if he had done right, maybe within 5 years, he could have received money? Or
Yes,
something
okay,
like
so
that?
let me tell you, yeah, so we spoke about trusts.
Right.
There's a trust for that. Leona Helmsley had a dog, and she put $12 million in a trust for a dog. If you have a child that had, drug issues or addiction issues, and it could even be a gambling addiction, a lot of different addictions, the home could go into a trust, not given to him directly, could be used for his essentials. There's somebody else who's a trustee. That trust could go into the Medicaid trust, could go into the estate planning trust, or it could be a standalone trust for this. So many different variations and ways to do it. But yes, you can provide for a child or someone else that has an addiction and still protect the assets and make sure they get what they need. Not what they want, what they need.
Cause that money could have been there to help him,
Exactly.
instead of just not giving him.
Or maybe help
anything.
them get clean. Some of these programs are really expensive.
Well, I think Tina, Ron, we're
Sure.
gonna have their information because they have the solutions, and you can be very proactive with your homeowners, with people you know, with your family members, right? Because all I can hear here is I'm saying all this planning that I haven't done. And we all need to really be proactive.
I'm gonna take out the whip.
We have to be proactive, so I thank you all for coming, grab a little snack, I don't know if anything's left there, but we thank you.
Thank you for
And
Thank you for
Thank you for
having us.
having
Thank
yeah,
you.
we're gonna have copies of this available, so if you need to, certainly show your, like I said, your family members, your clients, it's great stuff.